Hello, horror fans. My name is Rohit Hari, and you are watching Haunted Universe. Today, I am going to talk about a topic that's so to speak debate. Why I think modern day horror movies are better than old and classic horror movies. Grab some popcorn and let's discuss this scary topic together. Before we get into the video, follow my Instagram page for exclusive content. Firstly, let's break it down into year-wise categories. Between 1920 and 1950, many horror movies were released that now we consider classic horror films. Movies like Dracula, Frankenstein, and Nosferatu were made during those years. After that, horror movies were made from 1960 to 1990, which people of that time called modern day horror films. You can also see it written in the poster of the movie The Shining that it is a modern day horror film. But nowadays we call all those movies old horror movies. And there were some really good horror movies released at that time like Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist and The Shining. There were a lot of other good horror movies released during that time. If I were to list them all, this list would be too long. Now the time has come from 2000 till now. During this time, a lot of unique horror movies were released. And some were released just recently, movies like Abigail, Late Night with the Devil and Immaculate. Now our category is ready. Now let's move to the actual topic. When we think about old and classic horror movies, the first thing that comes to our mind is a jump scare and the frightening face of a ghost. There is no doubt that old horror movies were quite good, and there are some old horror movies that still scare you when you watch them. Movies like The Exorcist, which was released in 1973, or Rosemary's Baby, which was released in 1968. These horror movies still scare you when you watch them. In old horror movies, we were scared by showing ghosts, and today's horror films showing ghosts has become outdated. Movies like Midsommar, Hereditary, or recently released Late Night with the Devil. All these are horror movies, but there are no ghosts in them. Even if there is a ghost, then it is almost negligible. Yes, at this time also some such horror movie were released in which ghost was shown. Movies like Dead Silence, Insidious, or we talk about the world famous The Conjuring universe. These are quite good horror films, but you cannot call them unique horror films because there are nothing different happen in them. The same thing happens in all horror films. All these horror movies are very unique in themselves. But now I will tell you about some such horror movies which shown ghost as well as tell the good story. Talk to Me, which has been released recently, and after the release of this movie is created a stir on the internet because the concept of this movie was very different and the storytelling was very unique. And I want to name another movie, but that movie is a bit old. The name of that movie is Cabin in the Woods. This movie shown a unique concept along with its good story. Now creativity is very important in horror movies. As I said, now showing ghosts in horror movies becoming very rare. Now directors and creators depend on story, music, atmosphere and cinematography to scare. And many times directors have also been successful in this. Like director Ari Aster has only made 3 horror movies. And all 3 are considered very good horror movies. And in those horror movies we get scared by story, music and cinematography. Somewhere or the other, the current horror movie directors are inspired by the Shining movie, because the direction of the Shining movies was very different. And now all the horror movies that come in the way are inspired by that same movie. Now let's make a list why modern day horror movies are good. Number 1. Tone and style. Classic horror. Classic films tend to create suspense and psychological horror. They rely on atmosphere elements and subtlety to scare audiences. Modern horror. Modern horror movies often focus on intense in-your-face action. They leverage advanced special effects, realistic gore, and jump scare for immediate impact. Number 2. Comedy aspect. Old school horror movies are usually dramatic and serious with minimum humor. Modern horror. The 2020s have seen a rise in comedic horror movies, blending scare with humor. Example included Abigail 2024. Number 3. Themes and taboos. Old horror. Old horror movies often reflected societal fear and taboo. For instance, the Friday the 13th series punished characters for including in sex, drugs, and alcohol. Modern horror. 2020s explore unconventional themes, surreal horror, and societal anxiety. Films like Hereditary and Midsommar push boundaries. Number 4. Technology and effects. Old horror, limited technology meant practical effect. Makeup, puppetry were prevalent. Iconic characters like Freddy Krueger and Pinhead were brought life through practical means. Modern horror, advances in CGI allow for more realistic, visually stunning horror. Creatures like Demogorgon in Stranger Things showcase this. Number 5. Subgenres. Old horror movies had distinct subgenres like gothic horror, creature features, and psychological horror. Modern horror. The genre has diversified with found footage, paranormal activity, supernatural horror, The Witch, and social commentary. Us. Number 6. Representation and diversity. Older films often lack diverse representations, both in front and behind the camera. Modern horror. Recent years have seen effort to include diverse voices, exploring different cultures and a perspective. Movies like Get Out and A Quiet Place exemplify this shift. Number 7. Actors and acting. Now, acting is very important in horror movies. And even old horror movies, acting was good, but if we compare with current actors, it was not good at that time. And now in horror movies, we can see big actors and actresses. And in old horror movies, some big known actors were not taken. Remember, personal preferences play a significant role. Whether you prefer classic, old, or the contemporary, horror cinema continue to evolve. So this is my explanation of why modern day horror movies are better than old and classic horror movies. Don't forget to share your thought about this video. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. My name is Rohit Hari and I see you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.